She invited me to dinner, then sat on his lap in front of my friends saying, "Meet my real love." I don't think I'll ever forget the sound the room made when she said those words. It wasn't laughter, not really, though a few people chuckled nervously. It wasn't silence either. It was this strange mix of forks clinking against plates, glasses being set down a little too hard, whispers half swallowed, like the entire restaurant had just inhaled at once and didn't know what to do with the air. And me, I sat there frozen, my hand still halfway to my mouth, with a glass of wine I suddenly had no appetite for. That dinner was supposed to be a celebration. She'd asked me 3 weeks earlier if I could gather some of my closest friends for what she called a special announcement. She said it was important, that she wanted to honor me in front of the people I loved most. Her exact words still echo in my head. "Trust me, you'll never forget it." She was right. I'll never forget it. I remember how carefully I planned the evening. Called the restaurant days in advance, requested the long table by the window, ordered a couple of bottles of wine ahead of time so they'd be waiting chilled. I wanted it to be perfect, because she had made it sound like it was going to be something momentous. I even thought in some naive corner of my mind that maybe she was planning a surprise for me, something romantic, something that proved we were still aligned after the rough patches we'd been stumbling through. When she walked in that night, heads turned. She always had that effect, dressed in a black dress that clung just enough to demand attention, but still looked tasteful, hair curled, makeup subtle but striking. She gave me that smile, the one I used to believe was only mine, and for a fleeting second I felt proud. Proud that she was mine, proud to show her off to my friends. But then he walked in behind her. At first I didn't recognize him. Tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who looks comfortable in every room he walks into. She didn't introduce him right away. Instead she hugged me, kissed me lightly on the cheek, and whispered, "Thank you for doing this." I assumed he was a co-worker, maybe a friend she wanted me to meet. I didn't think twice when she guided him to the seat next to her. Dinner began like any other. Small talk, laughter, my friends joking about old memories. But something felt off. She barely looked at me. Every laugh seemed directed at him. Every touch of her hand brushed his arm instead of mine. My friends noticed. I could see it in their eyes. The glances they shot me, the tight smiles, but no one said anything. And then came the moment. Dessert had just been served, candles flickering on the table, wine glasses half empty. She stood suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. She raised her glass, smiled that dazzling smile, and said, "I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I know you thought this was about celebrating him." She gestured vaguely toward me. "But actually, it's about introducing the person who really makes me happy." Before anyone could process what she meant, she walked around the table, slid gracefully onto his lap, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him full on the mat. Then she turned back to the table, her eyes sparkling with something between triumph and cruelty, and said, "Everyone, meet my real love." The room erupted. Some gasped. One of my friends swore under his breath. Another tried to laugh it off, muttering something like, "You're joking, right?" But she wasn't joking. She leaned into him, her body language so intimate it left no room for doubt. And me? I felt the world tilt. My stomach lurched like I'd been punched. My vision blurred. My ears rang. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, to drag her off him and out of the restaurant. But I couldn't move. I sat there, staring, every nerve in my body screaming, while my friends looked back and forth between us like spectators at a car crash. He didn't say a word, not one. He just smirked, held her on his lap like she belonged there, like she had never belonged anywhere else. I excused myself. Somehow I found the strength to stand, to murmur something about needing air. I walked out of the restaurant, past the waiters frozen mid-step, past strangers who had turned in their seats to watch the scene unfold. Outside, the night air hit me like a slap. I leaned against the brick wall, trying to breathe, trying to stop my hands from shaking. She came out a few minutes later, not to apologize, not to explain, but to say, "You'll thank me one day." I didn't want to live a lie anymore. Then she turned back inside, laughing as the door swung closed behind her. I walked home that night, left my car in the lot. My friends tried to call, but I ignored them. I needed silence. I needed the city lights and the hum of traffic to drown out the sound of her voice, her laugh, the image of her sitting on his lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. The days after were a blur. The story spread quickly. My friends told others, others told more. Before long, whispers reached my workplace, my family, even my neighbors. I became the guy whose wife announced her real love at dinner. People pitied me, but pity felt like poison. I didn't want their sympathy. I wanted answers, but she didn't give me any. She moved in with him almost immediately, posted photos of them together as if I had never existed, smiling selfies, captions about finally being free, hashtags about true love, and always, she looked radiant. Meanwhile, I was left sifting through the wreckage, wondering how long she had been planning it, how long my life had been a shadow play for an audience I never knew existed. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that dinner hadn't been spontaneous. It had been staged. The whispers, the cropping me out of photos, the distance in her eyes, it had all been leading to this performance, and she had chosen my friends as the witnesses. She wanted me humiliated, wanted her declaration to be unforgettable, and unforgettable it was. But here's the thing about humiliation. It doesn't end you. It transforms you. It strips away the illusions, the softness, the blind faith. And what's left behind is sharper, colder, stronger. So I stopped asking why she did it, stopped replaying the night in my head, stopped wondering what I could have done differently. Instead, I started thinking about what comes next, about what you do when someone tries to write you out of your own story. Because she thought that night was the end. She had no idea it was only the beginning. When I walked away from that restaurant, leaving her on his lap in front of my friends, I thought I had lost everything. And in a way, I had. My marriage, my pride, the faith I had in the woman I loved. It all shattered in a single evening. But I also didn't know then that what she had done wasn't just betrayal. It was an opportunity. Because when someone shows you who they really are, when they strip you bare in front of witnesses, you don't fight them with anger. You fight them with patience. The first week after the dinner was the hardest. Friends called me, texted me. Some of them tried to show up at my place with beers or advice I didn't want. Half of them whispered, "We had a feeling," which cut me deeper than the actual betrayal. They had a feeling, and no one said anything. That told me everything about how she'd been carrying herself in the months before. She wasn't hiding it. Not really. She was grooming the room for her reveal, laying the breadcrumbs so that when she finally sat on his lap and announced him as her real love, it wouldn't be as shocking as it should have been. That realization burned, but it also lit something in me. She didn't just cheat. She staged it. She weaponized the people I trusted most. That wasn't love. That wasn't even lust. That was theater. And if she wanted to turn my life into a performance, then I was going to be the one who controlled the ending. So I started quietly. No dramatic confrontations. No screaming matches in the street. I cut her off. Didn't answer her text. Didn't acknowledge her social media posts, where she flaunted him like a prize. But I didn't block her either. I let her see me watching. Because silence, I realized, unnerves people more than rage ever does. At the same time, I paid attention. To him, to them. To the cracks in the perfect image they were painting. See, the thing about people who thrive on spectacle is that they're addicted to attention. They can't live without it. And when they stop getting the kind of applause they expect, they spiral. She was no different at first. Her posts about him were glowing. Hashtags about real love. Captions about how free she finally felt. But weeks later, they grew defensive. Happiness is when you stop caring about what others think. People will judge no matter what. So you might as well live your truth. The kind of captions you don't post unless you are worried about what people think. That was my opening. One of our mutual friends, a woman I'd known since college, reached out to me quietly. She said she didn't approve of what my wife had done, and she thought I deserved to know more. I met her for coffee, and what she told me nearly floored me. Apparently this real love of hers wasn't so real. He had a reputation, a string of other women, debts, promises he never kept. My wife wasn't the first person he'd swept off her feet with charm and bravado, and she wouldn't be the last. I asked my friend why she was telling me all this. She shrugged and said, "Because someone needs to balance the narrative. Right now, everyone thinks you're the fool and she's the one who finally found happiness. But that's not the truth, and I think you deserve to have it." I walked out of that cafe with my mind buzzing. For the first time since the dinner, I felt like I had leverage. Not revenge, not yet, but something better, truth. So I started digging, quietly, carefully. I didn't need to hire a private investigator. I knew the man. He was sloppy. His ego made him careless. Social media check-ins, receipts, little lies that didn't line up. It wasn't long before I had a file, screenshots of messages, photos of him with other women, whispers from people he owed money to. But here's where patience came in. I didn't release it right away. I waited, because timing mattered. If I exposed him too early, she'd defend him, say I was bitter, claim I was making it up. No, I had to let her stake everything on him first. Let her build the tower so high that when it toppled it would crush her too. That moment came at a party. Not just any party. Her birthday. She threw it herself. Invited everyone we knew. Made sure the night was documented on every phone in the room. She wanted to flaunt him again. To prove that their real love was stronger than the whispers. I went, because I knew I had to see it through. Walking into that room was surreal. People stared at me, whispered. Some offered awkward nods. She looked stunning, of course. She always did when she wanted to prove a point. He stood beside her, hand possessively on her waist, smirking like he'd won some invisible competition. And then, like déjà vu, she made another toast, glass raised, voice dripping with sweetness. I want to thank everyone for supporting me this year. It's been a year of growth, of change, of finding my real love. She kissed him, long and deliberate, right there in front of everyone again. And I felt the old rage bubble. But this time, I didn't flinch, because I knew what was coming. When the applause died down, I stepped forward, smiled, raised my own glass. To growth and truth, I said. And since we're all among friends, I think it's only fair that truth has its turn. I pulled out my phone, synced it to the projector she'd rented for a slideshow of her life with him. But instead of their curated selfies, up came screenshots. His messages to other women. His late-night check-ins at bars, miles away when he told her he was working. Photos of him with someone else. Time-stamped the same night she was posting about their date nights. The room went dead. Gasps. Whispers. The clatter of a glass dropped somewhere. She froze, face pale, eyes darting between me and him. He stood stiff, jaw tight, caught. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just said calmly, "You wanted everyone to meet your real love. So here he is, all of him." And then I left, walked out into the night, the sound of chaos erupting behind me, her shouting, guests murmuring, his voice rising defensively. That was the last time I ever saw them together. The fallout was immediate. She stopped posting. He disappeared. Friends, who once pitied me, started calling, telling me I'd been right all along. Even my parents, who had been heartbroken by the whole thing, looked at me differently. Not as the fool who'd been humiliated, but as the man who had the strength to expose the truth, without sinking to rage. She tried to contact me weeks later. Emails, texts, even a handwritten letter. The words were the same. Apologies, regrets, explanations. I didn't respond, because the truth was I didn't need to. She had already written her own ending, the moment she sat on his lap in front of my friends, and called him her real love. And him. Last I heard, he'd skipped town, burned through what little reputation he had left behind debts and angry voices. He wasn't anyone's real love anymore. Me? I rebuilt. Slowly, painfully, but on my own terms. And every time I think back to that night in the restaurant, when my world fell apart, I realize something I never saw then. She thought that was my ending. She thought she was humiliating me, cutting me out of my own story. But it was only the first act. And the ending was mine to write. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't fire or fury. Sometimes it's patience. Sometimes it's letting them hand you the rope they'll hang themselves with. And I wait. I let her build her story. Let him play the role. And when the time was right, I tore the curtain down. So when people ask me what it felt like to watch her sit on his lap and declare him her real love in front of everyone I cared about, I tell them the truth. It felt like death in that moment, but later, it felt like rebirth.